Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Sabbath Fellowship, and we're here for another get together on the philosophy of eschatology, which is what you need to know, what your reality is, what your existence will be, why were you born for such a time as this. This session is on Hagia Sophia, which is interesting because you're going to see that that's in the news right now, and it actually is big. It doesn't seem to be big, but it is. And then 666 will be tied into it too. I try not to be disparate in my thinking in terms of what's going on in the world and try to teach you something about what's going on historically and biblically. So, if we go back a long, long time ago, we have this beautiful building called the Hagia Sophia, which means holy wisdom, okay, in Greek. And so it was built, it was an Eastern Orthodox type of a church because there was the Western Roman government, we'll call it, which was also their religion. And then we had the Eastern. And this was the most beautiful building for nearly 1,000 years. Well, it fell into the Caliphate's hands, Turkey's hands, and Muslim hands. And then it was dominated from 1453 until about 1931 after the World War I. And then it became more of a museum after that. Well, now Erdogan, according to the news on the left-hand side, would like it to be turned into a mosque. And he's doing this to snub the West's nose and the Eastern Orthodox too, for that matter. And so I'm quoting on the top, "Here is Sophia. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast," and that'll be the 666. So this is historical, this is biblical, this is an important move because I'm going to show you what Erdogan really wants to accomplish and what his goal is. It's really pulling together the Caliphate again, and it all fits into history. So these are patterns that are important. So you'll see the patterns today, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. So, as I mentioned, he wants to restore the Caliphate. His first goal is to take over the Hagia Sophia and to turn it into a mosque. And then he's going after the Alaska. And so you can see he's going to Jerusalem. That's what he says. Here's the Jerusalem Post. Keep in mind that Erdogan, when he had a speech recently, he posted comments in English that sounded like, "Oh, this is a mosque for everyone." But then on the other side, in Arabic script, he said, "No, no, we're going for Al-Aqsa after this, guys, okay? This is part of a plan." So, and this is the quotes in here. So, Turkey's President Erdogan vowed to liberate the Al-Aqsa Mosque from Israel after resurrecting the Hagia Sophia as a mosque on Friday. And so it was a church for many, many, many years. And so, I'm not, sorry, it's not 1931, it was 1934 that was turned into a museum, you know? And so, Libya's civil war is going on. Turkey is fighting in Libya against Egypt, of all things. You have a little bit of this king of the north, king of the south. I'm not covering that today, but he could be the king of the north. Gog is different than the king of the north, and then the king of the south might be Sisi down in Egypt. We'll see. There's a lot that could play out over time, but this is one of those moves that's important. And he's laying out his battle plan to resurrect the caliphate, prepare for the Mahdi and the false prophet. He doesn't talk about the false prophet, but the Mahdi plays in with that, and then prepare for the Gog War against Israel. He would love to do that. That's what the Caliphate is there for. Dominate the world, and then he wants Jesus to return to kill the infidels. And so, who's going to play out in this? So maybe Erdogan is the king of the north. We'll see. But he wants the resurrection of the Hagia Sophia. Interesting talk. That's from his Twitter page from Friday of this week. And then there's the Mahdi down below. And according to their eschatology, Jesus appears or reappears or whatever. He is the son of Mary, so he's the son. Mary birthed a prophet, so to speak. So they regard him as a prophet. Okay, he will descend to help the Mahdi, and then the Mahdi will work with him, and they will destroy the infidels, which include the Jews. And the Gog picture here, the 15-year-old kid Natan from Israel from 2015 that said Obama will be the one coming against Israel. He's Gog. So we have the players situating themselves and situating the circumstances to get ready for the Gog War. That's 7 to 8 years away. So, be prepared for lots of ruminations in the meantime. So, what I want you to be aware of is that then in that particular chapter of Revelation 13, the final thing is 666. So this was an interesting video. If you want to watch it yourself, it's called Kelly Girl, Kelley Girl, and the Mark of the Beast vision seen in 2009. From May 6th of 2020. She's saying, like the shot that you got, the pox shot years ago that would raise your skin and make it look like you had a pox shot so people could just walk up to you and go, he's had the shot. So it's not the disease that's frightening for you or any potential diseases coming. It's the vaccine that will leave an odd type of a mark. So what they're talking about is 3 needles injected under the skin. Nobody would ever inject in the forehead. But if you were doing mind control or if you were doing something with a chip, you would put it there. That's where your limbic gland is, and that would remember the third eye from India and all the other stuff. Yeah, that's important. So they would want it injected there. It would be a tri-needle system. It would puff up and it would form some weird looking thing. So just be aware of that. I mean, it's an interesting video. I'm glad that I found it. I'm not sure that she's got all the answers, but she's got some questions there. And that is an interesting look that would match biblically with what's going on in Revelation 13. So, as always, I'm trying not to twist the Bible. I'm trying not to give you fake prophecy. I'm trying not to give you fake news. I'm giving you the philosophy of eschatology, and I'm trying to help you and educate you because things are moving faster, people, and you should be aware. So all of this has to do with battles, east versus west, and these land masses, and how everything has to come through basically the Hagia Sophia. So that is Constantinople. It's Istanbul now, but it was Constantinople for many, many years. I wanted to show you down below the seat of Satan is Pergamos. It's Bergama right now, or Bergama, and so it's not that far away. It's quicker to go by sea to get there. And this is this crux of the East versus West, and then the 7 churches, you could call them, the 7 assemblies of Asia Minor, of Turkey, that are cited in Revelation. So this is an important area here, people. This is that back and forth swing between East and West and the fight during the end times. So just keep in mind, this is a critical spot. This is on that peninsula that allows, and also the Jews cite this too. I should have cited that, but well, I'll cite a little bit about it. There's Rabbi, oh well, I'll cite his name later on, the Vilna Gaon. That's it. He said, when you see Russia getting close in the Black Sea here and coming through this section here towards the Hagia Sophia, you know you're getting close to the Messiah returning. So just really, really weird stuff, all related to that section of the world. So this is my take on the Daniel 2 dream and the Daniel 7 dream. Okay, so you've got, first, of course, Babylon was the head of gold, then the silver would have been Medo Persia, that would have been Cyrus, and then Greece, Alexander is the brass, it would be Nachash in the Hebrew, so that would be copper. It would be a pure element. Silver would be pure. Gold would be pure. Iron, in this case, would be pure, as pure as you could get it. And then Rome comes in, and then you have this mixture after that. And so I'm going to call that Byzantia. And we're going to see how that plays out today, how it kind of morphs into that the feat of iron and clay and how Byzantia fits in, and then the schism of 1050. So everything goes 490 years after that. So Justinian I dies basically 490 years later. Then Pope Benedict, the wicked pope, causes the split from east from west, and everything ties in historically. And Hagia Sophia fits into all of this stuff. Then Suleiman the Magnificent comes in 1540 and seals the Eastern Gate for the Messiah. Then the next 490 years takes you to 2030, people. That's 10 years from now, less than that, actually. So when we look at the empires, here's Babylon. You can see Babylon in the pink there, and you can see Medo-Persia up above, just waiting to conquer them later on. Then you've got the kingdom of Egypt, that had morphed a few times. By this point in time, it's possible that the slaves had taken over. So then the next one below that is the Persian Empire. That's Medo-Persia, and that's Cyrus. Cyrus was called the God's Mashiach in Isaiah 45:1. So keep in mind, you've got then them taking over Babylon and Lydia and other areas, and they dominated for a period of time. Then Greece came in, and they divided into 4 sections. And so once again, gold, then silver, then Greece is copper. So you've got 3 of the 4 kingdoms going on here. Then we move on to Rome, and that's iron. And so I have the quote from down below here from Daniel 2:43, and thou saw iron mixed with miry clay, and they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. They don't mix all that well. So then Yeshua comes along. He's the rock at the end, and he destroys the statue, and the kingdoms are all done. But right now, we're playing out the kingdoms, people. And that east versus west is going to play big in this end times. Okay, so once again, you see the miry clay down below here with the iron feet with clay in them, that picture. And then also, then here's the Byzantine Empire. And they were big at first. They took over a lot of the Roman territories. Then they shrunk a little bit. Then they shrunk a little bit more. By the end, they're basically, you can see Constantinople. That's basically where they are at the end, because they saw that the Caliphate was coming in and was going to kill them all. So everybody left. They kind of ran up towards Europe. And that's just the way things worked. That was that pivot point right there in Constantinople. So let's talk about Constantinople. It was the capital of the Roman Empire from 330 to 395, and then the Byzantine Empire 395 to 1204. That's nearly 1,000 years, people. That's a long time in ancient history. Okay, for an empire to stand that long. Then by 1453, they were sacked by the Ottoman Empire, and then it became the capital of the Ottoman Empire from 1453 to 1923, and there's prophecies involving that, and it became the Turkish Republic in 1923, and then, it was made the new capital of the Roman Empire in 324. So what happened in 325? I'll show you. And then many masterpieces were there, like the Hagia Sophia, which we have talked about, and the Eastern Orthodox Church was there. So it's very historic, very interesting, and very interesting for the end times. So as a Messianic believer, as a Sabbath believer, as more of a Jewish believer in Yeshua, we detest Constantine. We absolutely loathe him, because by the time that conference came together in 325, there were no Jews allowed. None of the apostles would have been allowed at that meeting. Okay, they were all Jewish, and they were detested for keeping Sabbath, for not eating pork, for all the things that they did, for basically being mocked as works-based people. And we all know that you're saved by grace, but you keep the deeds of Yeshua to prove that you love him. Because if your neighbor needs food and you don't give him any food, well, what does your faith in Yeshua mean then? It means nothing. So basically, he held the Council of Nicaea. This is a pretty picture of it. Well, actually, what happened was that they had swords drawn, and you would walk through the swords. And if you didn't agree exactly with what they were going to tell you to determine, off went your head. I mean, this is Constantine. There is no faith statement from this man. And so basically the Catholic Church started about this time, okay? And so this is an ecumenical council of non-Jews, completely non-Jews. And so in many cases, the Eastern, say, Jewish type believers were not even invited, okay? So it says here representing all of Christendom. No, that's actually a lie. It represented all of Gentile Christendom. No Jews were allowed. And so they talked about Christology, soteriology, other deep issues. They came up with the Nicene Creed. They came up with Easter. It was supposed to be Passover, people. It's always been Passover. There's no Easter in the Bible. There is a Passover, and there's all sorts of festivals, but there's no Easter. And then they came up with canon law and things like that. And they made sure that they officially kicked out all the Jews. And if you can tell by the fish hats, it's I don't know, whatever it is. So here's Justinian 1. He is the last Roman emperor. And interestingly enough, he didn't like Jews. He really hated Jews. So as soon as he started determining things against the Jews in 528, and he came up with his Justinian code, in came the plagues. So 528, he came up with the code. By 532, he started building Hagia Sophia. And by 536, during that time frame, the plagues were just coming in. So if you curse the Jews, God's going to send plagues your directions. Just keep that in mind. And so 40% of the population died from the plague. Okay? Now, in some cases, it was 2/3 of the population that died. So he lived from 482 to 565 AD. Constantinople was he was a scandalous monarch, no doubt about it. He built the Hagia Sophia, yes. So I call it the holy house of the goddess of wisdom, and that is accurate because there is a Sophia in Greek culture that is a goddess. It was one of the wonders, and it's still there. And so then he was the emperor from 527 to 564, set up the Justinian Code, and banned reading the Bible in Hebrew and Jewish synagogues, and all of these things. He just, well, and so as a result of that, here came the plagues from 519 to 605. They came through and they devastated the known, well, basically the Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire at that point in time. So they had weird blood-colored flashing skies and strangely multiple suns often accompanied this scenario. 10 incredibly destructive earthquake storms, 7 worldwide mega famines, totally chaotic and unseasonable weather with cataclysmic inundations by water, wind, and tempest, earthquakes, just and bacteria, and the women were eating their children. It was so bad. Okay, so this is from the Thunderbolts Project, and this is from Peter Mungo Jupp and the Justinian plague of 562. So just as he's ready to die, he claims it was electromagnetic. It's interesting because he said a comet appeared a whole year as the sun was darkened. And so we know actually what's going on. There was a horrific set of volcanoes that blew off in Iceland, and all of that debris came through Europe. And so they were basically obliterated during 536. There was no growing of crops. You just died, okay? And then the whole decade from 536 to 546 was horrible. So he's saying here, this is Mungo Jupp, he's saying 2/3 of all people died in these regions, okay? And this plague was preceded often by the appearance of several suns at the same time. So we would dismiss this today. We would study the volcanoes and earthquake activity and things like that and say, no big deal. Well, at this point in time, they knew they were under judgment, and I believe that Justinian I was part of that reason. So once again, he set up the code of Justinian in 528, which basically relegated the Jews to a substandard, horrible standard. Hagia Sophia in 532, 536 the volcanoes hit, no sun in 536 through 537. Then really there was an ice age from 536 to 546. Then officially the plague of Justinian really hit in 541. Then the Hagia Sophia was completed in 562. So you can see all of these trends going on, the earthquake activity from Iceland, and how it just came across the globe. It's like, okay, you want to curse the Jews? Here comes your plague coming. And so not only did he get the dust storm, but he also got the bacteria storm at the same time. And he earned it, And so holy wisdom, now we're going to cover that. So basically, he started building it in 532 after the second basilica fell. This is an earthquake region, okay? Just get used to it. So then he's the last Roman emperor. He built the third, entirely different basilica, a large, more majestic basilica. And so he wanted it to be the showpiece, and it really was for 1,000 years, if not longer. It's still a showpiece to this day. And so it's a beautiful dome. It was well designed in Greek architecture. And so everything sophisticated went to this location for over 1,000 years. But during that time frame, you have him banishing the Jews in many ways, and then here comes the plague of Justinian, 541, 542, and then it came back again later on. And so it's just interesting how these things overlap. And so he legislated against the Jews. He converted the synagogues into churches. Everything was forced. And here comes the plague. Then we move forward. Now, remember, 490 years. So we went from 560 plus 490 years, and we're up to 1040, or 1050 rather, I'm sorry. And so in 1050-ish, you've got this horribly wicked Benedict IX, just a brutal pope. He bought the papacy a few times. He was pope like 3 times. Wicked as a man could be, okay? And so during that time frame, the Eastern Orthodox said, we really want nothing to do with you. And so he split the church. And you've got the two churches then occurring, the East and the West. And that split point is Constantinople, that split, okay? And so the East maintained a good, faithful tone. And, Benedict and some of the other popes were so wicked, but it caused the schism. And you can say whatever you want to say about the Roman Catholic Church today. There are some good believers. I'm not a big fan. I was a big fan of John Paul II. I was. I liked the fact that he and Ronnie Reagan stopped communism dead in its tracks for that period of time. But I'm not a big fan of Pope Frank at all. So there are many godly Catholics, Roman Catholics, but there is some wickedness in the Roman Catholic Church, and this is one of the most wicked, Benedict the Ninth. And so that caused the schism in part. I mean, it was already moving along, but he forced it. And so as that occurred, then the Caliphate came through, and they pushed into Europe, and they almost conquered Europe. Now, during this time also, we have to move forward to 1217. So in 1140, we have Judah ben Samuel born, a Jewish fellow, lived up in Regensburg, Germany, and then he died in 1217, and he kicked off the last 10 Jubilees prophecy that then 300 years later, 6 Jubilees later, 1517, the Turks, the Ottomans, would take over Jerusalem, rule it for 400 years until 1917. That worked. Selim I took over in 1517, and then Allah Hanavi, the prophet of Allah, that's Allenby, General Allenby, the British fellow, walked into Jerusalem in 1917. Jerusalem was conquered during the Six-Day War in 1967. So then at some point in time now, we should be kicking off the end of days after 2017. And so here's his prophecy. When the Ottoman Turks were already a power to be reckoned with on the Bosphorus. Remember that area there where the Hagia Sophia is? That's the Bosphorus right there. In the time of Judah ben Samuel, when they conquered Jerusalem in 1517, they will rule over Jerusalem for 8 Jubilees until 1917. Afterwards, Jerusalem will become a no man's land for 1 Jubilee, that's till 1967, and then in the 9th Jubilee, 2017, it will once again come back into the possession of the Jewish nation, which would signify the beginning of the Messianic end time. That's his prophecy. Highly accurate. Then as we move forward to 1453, we see Constantinople fall and the Hagia Sophia move into the Caliphate's hands. And that's 478 years then until 1931 to 1934. So it's almost 480-ish years. Very interesting time frame. It's almost biblical. 490 is definitely biblical. 480 is in its own way too. So by this stage, Constantinople was underpopulated and dilapidated because they knew that the Caliphate was coming, so they ran. And so it was a cluster of villages separated by fields, and then in April 2nd, which is Passover, 1453, Constantinople fell to the Caliphate. And then it was controlled after that for 480-ish years. So, and that was Sultan Mehmed II. So very interesting, very, very pattern-like, and that's what I want you to see. So let's run through the theory one more time so you can see it. You saw the picture of the statue, and you saw the animals. So his legs of iron, his feet are part of iron and part of clay. That's Daniel. Okay, so Rome is iron, and then and they descended until 560, and during that time frame they kind of merged together with the clay during the Justinian time, and then Justinian fell at 560-ish. He died officially in 565, but he was dying in 560 when the last Roman died, and then the plagues consumed them, and you saw the contrast between him coming against the Jews and the plagues coming. Then Eastern Orthodoxy split like legs of Rome by 1050. And then the Caliphate came through, like Medo Persia then, ascended until 1540 amidst these plagues, and then the final kingdom of the beast could fall in 2030. I mean, that seems to be a pattern. I don't know. We're 10 years away. We'll see what happens. I want to tell you some historical data on this too, that in 1539, 1540, Suleiman the Magnificent rebuilt the Eastern Gate and sealed the old gate that Yeshua walked through, and it had to be done at that point in time. He was seeing lions in his dreams, so he finally he asked a friend, what should I do? And the friend said, turn and face the lions and ask them what he should do to save his life. And he was told to build the wall of Jerusalem. So he did. He sent money down there. He did not go there. He sent people down there. And he also asked Allah for guidance on this. And I don't have the answer for what he got, but it's very interesting. So Suleiman the Magnificent, like Solomon the Magnificent, rebuilt these walls right here. So underneath there, at the level of the graveyard, the Muslim graveyard, is the old Eastern Gate. It's there, guys. I'm sorry, James Fleming, I can't give you the date, I think it was in 1967, went there, fell into a grave during a rainstorm, and saw the old Eastern Wall. You can see the skulls, and you can see the wall, the gate there. So it's there, and that scholar, Dr. James Fleming, saw that and took a picture of it. So I have another video. If you go into my other video series, you'll see that picture of what he took. Now, this is from Josh Elsom. He's a friend of mine, and he's been figuring out the end times for a long period of time and studying off Mark Biltz. So he's saying that there were eclipses during these time frames that marked important days, but there's one that's hidden from all of us that occurred as Suleiman was sealing the Eastern Gate for only the Messiah to walk through, and that's Ezekiel 44:3. So in 1539 on Passover, there was a blood moon over Jerusalem. It was not an eclipse. No, it was a lunar eclipse. It was not a blood moon. It was just a lunar eclipse. That was it. There was a period of 4 of them. Okay, then Passover, then Sukkot, then Passover, then Sukkot. In 1539, 1540, as Suleiman's men are literally sealing the Eastern Gate, building a new Eastern Gate above it, you've got this occurring where it is a lunar eclipse, but it's the quiet one, and it's a significant one. And this sets up for the end times. Now, the last 490-year sequence takes you up to 2030. So we're getting closer, okay? Now we go through the verses, and we want to show you the verses that match up with all of this. So we're in Revelation 13. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. So that means that the false prophet is earthbound, and he's a human being. Most of us believe that it's Pope Francis right now. It had 2 horns like those of a lamb. That's speaking like you would hear it in Daniel chapter 8, where the 2-horned ram is fighting against the single-horned goat, and it loses. So, but it spoke like a dragon, so that means Satan's involved in this, okay? And it exercises all the authority of the first beast, so that's exousia, which is delegated authority. So he has authority. God allows these things to occur, and he's exercising the authority of the first beast, so that is the Antichrist in its presence, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, the Antichrist, and the one whose fatal wound, we don't know exactly what that means, but I think he loses one of his cities, and that's what seems to be the one fatal type of a wound of it. But it gets healed. But at some point in time, something happens to one of his cities that he controls, the 10 of them. It performs great miracles, even causing fire to come down from heaven. Moses and Eliyahu are able to do that. So if they are the 2 witnesses, they'll be calling down fire. Well, that means the false prophet will do so too. Onto earth as people watch. It deceives the people living on the earth by the miracles it is allowed to perform in the presence of the beast, and it tells them to make an image honoring the beast, an icon that was struck by the sword but came alive again. It was allowed to put breath into the image of the beast. We're going to discuss that term because that's Pneuma. And Pneuma is an interesting term. So allowed to put breath into the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak. And it was allowed to cause anyone who would not worship the image of the beast to be put to death. It also forces everyone, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, preventing anyone from buying or selling unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This is where wisdom is needed. Those who understand should count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person, and this number is 666. Let's look at the text more deeply. So, of the beast, telling those dwelling on the earth to make an image to the beast that has I can't say it, the plague, a plague of the sword, and has lived, and there was given to it give the breath. So there's Pneuma. You see it there in the text, to the image of the beast. So, guys, when I study that out in Hebrew, it's ruach, and ruach can be what, okay, so ruach for us could be the neshama. So we have the adama, which is the clay that is part of our body, the dirt, the dust. Then we also have the nephesh, which is our animal soul, which can die, or sleep, if you want to call it that. And then we have this pneuma, which is the neshama, and that is that consciousness. So it seems as though the false prophet has the ability to give consciousness to the image of the beast. so that also it should speak the image of the beast, the icon, you can see the word icon there, and cause as many as it would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And so people are going to die, and that is the word for killing. They're going to be killed. Then, later on in chapter 13, verses 17 and 18, or on the forehead of them. So the mark has to be given so that no one should be able to buy or sell the one having, unless they have the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of it. Here is Sophia, like Hagia Sophia. Okay, it's a goddess in Greek world, and so is the one having understanding. It's noun, which is weird. Let him count. It's I'm sorry, I didn't look this up. Face fito, face fisato. And that should be let him count, but it's not arithmetic because you see arithmon there and then arithmon again. So the arithmon of the beast and the arithmos of a man's, it is the number and it is 666. Or because one of those letters is a stigma, we don't know exactly what it is. It could be a 616. So I wanted you to see that this Greek word 5585, fisato, is to count with pebbles, to compute, calculate, reckon, or to decide by voting. There's an election this fall, people, and it could be decided by voting. Just note that. Very interesting to find that in the text, and that seems to be what's coming next. So it's very, very interesting to see that this is going to be calculated, possibly decided, determined by voting in terms of the mark of the beast. And then what's the stigmas count? I don't know. So we're going to look at the words one more time. Sophia is the key word of what's going on here, which is wisdom belonging to men. It's not God's wisdom. And there is a goddess called Sophia. And then it is science and learning, so it's very Greek. And the Bible is not a Greek. Yes, there's the Septuagint, and the New Testament is written in Greek, but it's a Hebrew Bible. Okay, and I would argue, especially the book of Hebrews, is written in Hebrew and translated to Greek because you can see it. So the main thing is that the Greek system is very logical, very anti-God, and Sophia is part of that. So there might be a hint in there someplace. And then the other side, the Pneuma. The Pneuma is a coded reference for God's Spirit. It is. It always has been in the Hebrew and the Greek. And then, so spirit, i.e., the vital principle by which the body is animated, that would be the neshama. And that means that this false prophet is going to have greater abilities than we realize because he might actually have the ability to put the neshama into somebody, the breath of life, which is very interesting. So you can see it here, how these words matter, and this is what's coming down the line. We should see some of these things in our lifetimes. As always, I say that the birth pangs are the seals. They're opening. They have directions, and you have to be aware of that. Then the trumpets hit, and then it's sometimes, I don't know when, we're going to see this 666. And it could be that mark that lady showed. That was very interesting, people, to see that. Then the two witnesses show up just before we go into the first half of the Great Tribulation. They leave just before the midpoint, and then you go into the bowls after that. And the trumpets are the first half of the Great Tribulation. The seals resemble the birth pangs that Jesus talks about in Matthew 24. They just do. And the seals have directions, and they are birth pangs, and they are based on the directions of Zechariah 1 and 6. And the 4 judgments that are coming that would cause 1.944 billion deaths would be seal number 4, and they are the Ramphea sword, Limo, which would be drought, Thanatos, which is the name of that being, and also the part of that, 1/4 of the piece of this, which would be death. And then COVID-19, or biological warfare, it seems to be the last one because therion in the Greek means small, very, very small animals. Then we move on to seal 5, which is martyrdom, seal 6. And I hope it wasn't too disparate today. I hope it all made sense. And I hope you get the Hagia Sophia connection and all the historical background. Take care. Bye-bye.